Hello, I'm Lee Carroll, the original Cryon channel. This is a very quick message to let you know that you are on the Hioka channel, where my channelings are being used. I give full permission for this YouTube channel to commercially use anything from my Cryon YouTube channel or my Cryon.com website. I appreciate and honor the versions of the Cryon lessons presented on this channel. Blessings to you, and thank you for visiting this channel. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Cryon of Magnetic Service. Indeed, we see you. Indeed, we love you. Indeed, we have been with you. It's difficult for any human being to change a paradigm. A paradigm that you've grown up with, a paradigm that you were taught, a paradigm that those you loved taught you. The ones you would look at and say, these are the wise ones, whether they were instructors or parents or friends, who would take you by the hand and say, here's how it works. And that is how you have achieved what you've achieved and survived what you've survived. And that's what you teach your kids. And now we're telling you that this paradigm that you have become so used to is starting to change. And each time we say that, there are so many who say, well, I don't want to change. I want to keep it the way it is. You know, it's semi-working. I've got a handle on it. It's okay. And so we're not going to say change anymore. We're going to say get better. If you thought there was something ahead that would make things better, I don't think there would be the fear. We love to tell stories. We love to give you metaphors so that you can see yourself within them. A little later tonight, we'll give you another parable. We'll call it the end of a cycle, about our favorite character. Storytelling is something that humans love, can relate to, get into, and then later they can apply it to that which is themselves. I once gave a channel about a human born in a house. I want to review that right now and enhance it. Let's make that human a child scientist. In other words, a child who would become a scientist. And a good one. Perhaps one of the best on the planet. And in that house, which we will call life, that child learns everything. Where everything is, how to walk, how to play, how to laugh, how to cry. All of the things of life, and then slowly the science as he grows. And in this science that he's attracted to, he makes discoveries. And the discoveries are this: that there is also an invisible world around him. There's light he can't see, and sounds he can't hear, and physics that he doesn't understand. He's delighted to think that there would be these things, and yet he never applies himself to those things. He just looks at them and says, yes, they're there, they're there. I'll study them some more and I'll report, and they're there. Meanwhile, I'll go back to the things I can see, because that's how I earn my living, and that's how I touch others. That's how I drive home. I've got to depend on the things I can see. It's a statement that says, don't bother me. with new things, even though I've discovered them, even though I may be the only one on the earth who is measuring them. It's another planet, it's another world, it's another scenario that I have nothing to do with because I've got to go home. And I've got to be with those who I am with, and I have to eat, and I have to live, because that's my box, and I'm happy with it. The scientist has a child, and the child is even better scientist than he is. And in a new consciousness, the child sees the invisible things and says, Dad, look, you can actually manipulate that which is invisible. And the father says, I don't believe it. And the child shows him, you see, you didn't try this because you weren't interested in going there. You just are interested in looking. And the child starts to manipulate it. And the father watches. He says, wait, go back a moment. Well, I just saw something. And the child said, oh, yeah, that is a mystery, isn't it? And the father said, what is it? And what the child would not see, the father did. He says, look, it looks like an elevator. And the child said, I'll bet it is. Remember, this is an allegory. And together the two start to push the buttons on the invisible things that they never, ever would touch before. And in a quantum energy, the elevator opens. And then they decide, do I get in or not? The elevator, we notice, can only go up in this scenario, and that means better to them. And so they both get in. Not knowing whether they can return or what it's going to mean. And the doors close, and they realize that the room they were born in is the first floor of an 80-story building. And that there are levels and levels and levels of dimensions and consciousness. And then they start reading the labels on the floors, and they all have their own names on them. And it gets better and better. And then they look at each other and say, well, here's the biggest test. Can we go back to where we were? Can we get home? And they push the ground floor button, and it goes right back there. Right back there. They said, this is good. We can always go back to where we live. And the doors open, and they walked out, and it stank. And they couldn't stay there. Let's go to the 5th floor. It's much better there. I don't have to interpret this to you. That is what is going on with the new paradigms here. That what you think is good, what you have got used to and what you're told is so basic that someday you'll look back on it and say, I'm glad I pushed the button. I'm glad I went to that which I didn't understand, into the unknown, which was invisible to me. I'm glad I did it. Because everything got bigger, and I understood it because it was so intuitive. It's almost like I was built to understand it. As these things came at me, so complex at first, later they became second nature. I'm never returned to the ground floor, ever. I just won't go there. Because it's better where I am. And in this world that you live in, there are so many who are still on the ground floor living with you. And it's not up for you to take them by the hand and tell them you've got something better. Instead, it's up to you to live in a way that they're going to come to you and say, show me the elevator, because I know you found it. That's the quest. The way shower. We'll talk about that a little more tonight. It gives a whole different perspective on spirituality, perhaps, or religion, perhaps, because it's none of those things. It's practical living in an era where the creative source of everything starts to touch you and say, remember me. where you start to be activated in ways you didn't think you could, where it changes your health and your personality and how you view others. And it gives you the wisdom to say things in different ways that are not hurtful to accomplish the same goal. To let people know how you are, how you feel, and who you are in benevolent ways, and ask them to come along. It's a new time, dear ones. And the old soul that sits in front of me and the one who listens knows it. And that's why you're here. It's astonishing, the lives that are represented in this place, the earth experience that is here. I started a channel not so long ago, and I said, in the beginning, there was love. There still is. There always has been. A love for the magnificence of the God inside of every human being. That's the design. That's what was given you. Your scriptures are correct. There was a time, a story that would have humans existing almost as animals normally on the human planet when angelic forces came here and gave you the free choice. God inside changed your DNA and turned you loose. And you sit here because of that. At a time that was not really predicted, a time beyond the time you were supposed to be here. I arrived in 1989. I've always been here. But I arrived in the life of the man in the chair in 1989. And I arrived for only one reason: to tell you stories, to give you paradigms of shift and parables to look at, and to try to guide you into that which would become the shift. The idea that humans would go past the year 2000 was not something that was well accepted. You were going to have trouble like you always had trouble, and to make it past 2012, that was absurd. Because you were overdue for what human nature had always given you. About this time, you wouldn't make it. There's a lifespan of countries, a lifespan of civilization, a lifespan of organizations before they become dysfunctional and often then destroy the core that created them. That's human nature as it existed, and that's changing. A human nature that will begin to evolve in ways you didn't expect, in ways that would seem impossible, that's already beginning. And the most profound change in the human being to come, that starts even with you, is you starting to actively participate in a more realistic remembrance of your Akashic record. When you could start remembering how long you've been here, the wisdom that you have, it almost gives permission for you to be different. It builds bridges from the unknown to the known, and vice versa. It gives you that which you haven't had before, and that is reason to continue. I have a story. This is not going to be a marathon channel. These are short stories filled with love. We give these stories so you can repeat them and remember them and analyze them and see perhaps what's missing and get it the next time or the next time. And they're always stories about you, cloaked perhaps in the attribute of a human named woe. Woe is not a man or a woman. Woe is a woman. But in this particular scenario, woe is a woman. And I want to take you to this woman's life. It's a story, perhaps, of every woman. There's magic involved. The magic of supernatural things that you might even call angelic energies, where time even may change. But it happens right now. Woman is about 30. Woe is about 30 to 32. And in that place where she is in life, there's frustration. There's a lack of self-worth. She's done her education. She's had a child. She is settled, and she starts looking at her life differently. You wonder why there's not more young people in this room. They're too busy. As you know, dear ones, there's a time for fun. There's a time for education. There's a time for self-examination that comes when things are more settled. And they were for her. And in order to get around the frustration that she was feeling, both in relationship and at work, with things that perhaps didn't go exactly as she wished, like so many of you, she went into fantasy. And in this, she built a world of her own. And she would spend hours fantasizing, not about the past or who she might be, but of a totally different woman. Woe looked at herself in situations and scenarios and stories that she had built, and they had names and times and dates and dialogue. And she existed in this world as often as she could, and it worked for her. And she would come out of those visions of fantasy that she would have where she was heroic or saved this or was respected. And it would give her so much self-worth, and she would say, that was good. I loved that. I didn't tell anybody she was doing that. You haven't either. But it didn't make her sad when she came back to the reality. It made her feel good. It was her consciousness drug, if you want to call it that, to go to a place where she can envision and pretend and be. She loved to go to the films and read the books because they were her when she was reading it. And in the films, she was them when she was watching. It made her feel better. And she would come from those places and those times and those imaginings feeling better. But eventually she realized there's only so many stories I can make. And then she started analyzing herself in a more esoteric way. And she started asking questions that perhaps you only ask after a certain age. Why am I doing this? Could this be that these are not fantasies at all? What if I'm remembering something within me that somehow is transferred through the ages to me? She didn't even think of past lives. She thought maybe it's in the air, it's in the ethers, it's in the field, and she's just picking it up, and she's living these things. They're so real, they make her feel so good. And she asked these questions almost out loud to anyone who would listen while she was alone. And then one day it happened. While she was asking this question to herself and pondering a greater reality that she was living, even in fantasies, the angel came. And she wasn't afraid. It's almost like the angel was a friend. It's almost like she said, well, I've expected you because I've been asking about this. And she knew she was having a profound vision, and it wasn't a fantasy at all. And all that glory, there the angel was, beautiful, spinning colors, and giving her the feeling of love. And the angel started speaking to her. Whoa, the angel said, you do understand, don't you, that every single one of these beautiful fantasies is a past life experience. You carry it in that thing in your DNA, not in your brain, but in your DNA. Memories of who you were. They're profoundly remembered and accurate and detailed, down to the names and the dialogues, down to the emotions. And in this scenario, you're starting to remember all of the good things that have happened to you in the ages. And then the angel went on to say, and there's a reason why I'm here, why I'm always here, why I've always been here. You see, whoa, you've done this every single life. You have put together fantasies, you've asked the question, you've asked for an angel, and I show up. Every single lifetime, it's you and me talking right now about why you're fantasizing these things. And then, whoa, I have something else to tell you. After I tell you it's you, and after I have solidified the value of it, and after I tell you it's okay to have the fantasies because that's really you and you can go on and do it again, after that, I disappear, you wake up, and you forget it entirely. It's like Groundhog Day. It continues and continues and continues and continues. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, you've had to be talked out of the lack of self-worth. And we have this conversation. And then you wake up and somehow you feel better. And you say, well, those aren't fantasies. That's me. I can do this again. And you go on to be something. Because you have permission. And you realize that your self-worth is not something that you're getting from others. It's something that's you. The self-worth is you. Don't listen to anybody. That'll pull you down. And you go on to do stellar things. That's why I'm here yet again. Whoa. Yet, I'm going to tell you something. It's the last time. And Woe thought, she said, oh dear. Am I not coming back? And the angel laughed and he says, you're all coming back. You see, you're coming back differently. You're coming back with instinct that you don't have now, instinct created from Akashic learning. Instinct that is Akash. That when you awaken the next time, I won't have to enter your life because you're not going to do fantasies. You're going right for the reality because you'll have that self-worth, because you'll know who you are. You're not going to make the same mistakes you did before. Almost out of the womb, you're going to be ready for this. It won't be till 6 or 7 that you start talking about who you used to be. Not in detail, but you know this is not a unique, one-time experience. And that won't be necessary anymore for you. Because you will have graduated to a higher consciousness. Let me tell you something, Woe, that around you are old souls that are having that right now without having to come back. Because of the new energy on this planet. Whoa, I want to talk to you about your lives, just like I always do. You remember in the 1400s? You remember the lives you saved? Do you remember being the one that they called to give birth? You have names for it now, names for it then. They would call you to help a woman give birth, and you knew so much more than the doctors. Because you had the solutions, you had the herbology, you had the consciousness. You could feel what the baby was going through. You could ally the mother and the baby together, and they called you, and they called you, and they called you, and pretty soon even the doctors called you. 1400s. You were amazing back then. How many babies and mothers did you save? Do you remember the time when almost the time to give birth and you saw the wrong position and you said, no, not yet, stop pushing. Can you remember that? Can you remember reaching in and turning the child? And the mother lived and the child lived and you said to the mother, okay, push. It was beautiful. You were known for miracles. That was one of them. Whoa, do you remember the battle you were in as a man in the 1600s? And you didn't hold a weapon. Your job was to run around and help the ones who were dying. Did you remember that? You couldn't do anything because the battle was so wounding. They were dying. You couldn't do anything. But you'd hold their hands. Do you remember that? And they'd look in your eyes, and even as a man, they would say, tell my mother, tell my sister, here's my name. And you would. And your sword was your notebook. And you'd write the names down. And you'd go see Mom. And you'd go see the sister. And you'd say, I was with him. And you'd weep with them, and you'd say, here's what he said. Oh, it's beautiful. You were helping people. All your lives you helped people. All of them. Do you remember when you were the ship's captain? And the ship was in so much trouble that you had to hold position. That's what they called it. You had to hold position using the engines in order for the lifeboats to be able to go down without the ship tilting in a way that the lifeboats would not, where you had to keep maneuvering it because of the holding of the ship at the one side. You remember that? And you steered it and you held position, and all the boats were gone. And it was your turn to leave, and you wouldn't leave. It was too late. Remember that? Do you remember what you did when you went down into a very cold ocean? A seaman's mistress is the ocean, and you smiled and said, it's okay. It's okay, because this is an honorable death for a sailor. Do you remember that? Lifetime after lifetime. And I'm here yet again, to recount these fantasies that you're having right now and creating. To tell you it's okay, because you deserve to be here. You're magnificent, because you're an old soul, and that's what old souls do. They awaken and help people in so many different ways, sometimes privately, sometimes publicly. They never necessarily write books or be on stage. They just help people. And that's who you are. Well, that's who you always have been. And every single lifetime gets a little better, and I'm never going to see you again. Because the next time you arrive, I'm going to live with you, and you're going to understand the higher self. And you're going to know who I am, and I don't have to keep coming and erasing your mind from my visit. It's the end of a cycle. Whoa. That's the parable. And so as Cryon, I say to all of those who've listened today and are in the audience, you have fantasies. And sometimes you have fantasies because you don't have what you think is the real you in order to accomplish what you can fantasize. But you can, and you will, because that's who you are. These channelings, these meetings, these times, these episodes together are for you to draw closer to that which is supernatural. A higher self that if you could talk to it would say, you are magnificent. Now get on with it. And start with loving yourself and helping yourself. And when you get to that place where it's okay, there will be those who come to you and asking you how you do it. And you can then be the way shower. That is the hero of the age. The way shower is the one you would fantasize about. The one who is wise enough so that the ones at work will come to you. The ones in the family will come to you. And others as well. And you can sit and talk and change lives and change minds, and they can get up out of the chair and leave differently because they visited you. One with high self-worth who has lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes of saving lives and helping people. That's who you are. I know this because that is what old souls have done. You awaken to lives and you go into compassion mode. You awaken to lives, and some can't understand that. Even though some of you are burned at the stake because your magic shows, you still come and try it again. And here you are, where they're not going to burn you at the stake. Instead, they're going to come and see you because they recognize you've got wisdom. That is what's going to change this planet. I sit in front of you. Those of you who are listening, there's more. There's a lot more. But in this new energy, dear ones, all the fantasies that you could put together, you could paste upon yourself and be them. And not be frustrated. And not have to go outside of yourself because of who you are. That is the reality of the moment. I'm Cryon. I would not tell you things that are not so. That's the truth of the day. In the beginning, there was love. It has continued to this point, and there is still love. In the end, which will come sometime, very distant, there will be love. In certain languages on the planet, love is so special that there are different meanings, different spellings, and they understand. Mostly the ancient languages, the oldest on the planet, will have this. There is an understanding that love has so many aspects and so many parts and so many ways of being expressed. The love you have for a parent, the love the parent has for you, they're different. The unconditional love that you would have for an animal, and there's back to you, it's different. But the one that is the highest, if you have to measure height, is the love of God. And the love in you is simply that which is mirrored from the Creator. That is how you have it. If I told you this, that if it were not for God inside you, there would be no love in a human. There would be loyalty and perhaps appreciation as one animal to another, living side by side, intelligent enough to speak. But without God inside, there would really be no love. Without God inside, there would be no compassion. And so that's why you meet people or you know of people along the way who you would say they're compassionless, or they have no idea how others feel. There's no empathy at all. And then you would understand what free choice creates. Because these are the things that will vary and go up and down with consciousness, showing you that it is not automatic that a humanoid walking any planet, with or without God, would have compassion or would have love just because they have intelligence. They would not. And so it is a God-given thing. And yet we are saying that you are part of that God. So you gave it to yourself by plan so that you could awaken or not. And it's no secret then that evolution, or as you raise the consciousness, is going to be greater compassion and greater love. It's automatic. It comes with the system of God. The system of God. That's the system in humans. It's the system in humans all over the galaxy. And I've just given you a hint. When you meet your ancestors of the galactic order, meaning those from other systems, they will be humanoid. Some will be bigger. Some will be smaller. There will be different shades, perhaps, and face shapes that you haven't seen before. But they're all humans. And that tells you something, that the vessel that has been chosen to hold God is human, and is beautiful, and it is elegantly designed, and it's been around almost before Earth. How does that make you feel? By design, indeed. Oh, but there's so much more. If you spoke to scientists about what you are being taught in channeling about DNA, they wouldn't necessarily begin to make the same leap because they haven't discovered these things yet. DNA is chemistry to them. DNA does not yet say consciousness to them. For so far on your planet, consciousness belongs to the brain. Now we're telling you, and we have before, that there are attributes of consciousness that involve a lot more than your brain. The triad, the brain, the heart, the pineal, we told you this, all together making consciousness. But where did consciousness come from? And can it be modified by something other than that triad? And the answer is DNA. But it hasn't yet been seen. Again, DNA is chemistry. It's an interesting part of the body because it is unique to you, and every single molecule of the trillions that you have are identical. It's a lot different than cellular structure where you have a heart cell or a kidney cell or a skin cell. They're all unique, but they're different and they're functional for the organ that they belong to, but not DNA. It's the same everywhere, and there's a lot of it. And the questions arise that never have been ever answered is why? Why so much DNA, even though it contains the blueprint for the heart cell and for the kidney cell and all of that? That's done. It was done when you were in vitro. Why now? Why is DNA so prevalent? What else might it do? And then you start the study of identical twins. And then there's a big aha. Identical twins can be at opposite ends of the earth, as far away as you can be. And if something happens to one, the other one senses it. And you can ask identicals all over the planet, is that the way of it? And they'll look at you and say, absolutely, 100%. And then they will tell you, here's how it happened to me several times. She was here, I was here, he was here, I was here. And identicals have something in common. They have the same DNA. Identical DNA. Now, this should tell you something. There's a connection between them, and it's expressed in, are you ready? Consciousness. So you cannot then divorce consciousness from the biology of the double helix. Identical twins receive consciousness signals between them when something happens to one that the other then gets. If this isn't proof enough, there's even more. And we have told you this before, that DNA sets up a quantum field. Trillions and trillions of molecules of DNA are part of the setup of a field around you. And the field around you is multidimensional, and it's called the Merkaba. That field is caused and built and echoes the DNA in you. So suddenly there is a picture of a complexity of the human being that goes even further than any chemistry that has yet been observed or discovered or worked with or measured. And DNA will eventually reveal itself as the key to everything, since the Merkaba has patterning in it that will actually show your health when you can see it and when you can measure it. And we've told you this before, that the seers around you, the sensitive ones, the medical intuitives are reading the field of your DNA, the Merkaba of the soul, if you wish to say. This is a beautiful plan. How does it make you feel that there's so much more yet to be even discovered about you and your body that is sacred and beautiful, planned, designed, and isn't new? It isn't new. When life was microbial on the earth, there were humans on other planets. And now the one that you wanted to hear, and you were them. Dear ones, this planetary adventure called Earth is just the newest one. You have come from other places, other planets, doing the same thing with other consciousnesses, with other DNA, looking the same but slightly different. And that's why when you get to Earth for the first time, no matter when you arrived for the first time, you're comfortable. You're a human again. And you're learning the culture of Earth. We speak sometimes of the newbies, the ones who have just arrived, being so different because they're just getting used to the consciousness that the Earth has created. Have you ever noticed how clueless a newbie is on some things that actually are low energy? They expect more and they're shocked where they're tricked. Have you noticed? That they're pure and they're shocked when they're betrayed. Have you noticed? This newbie has come from a higher consciousness planet long before you and has arrived with expectations of a higher baseline. And the newbie is the first one that receives that which is the low energy realization. The newbie is the one who will be the most depressed the fastest when they somehow realize they've stepped into a place that's not as nice as where they came from. And then they get used to it. And then they work with it. And lifetime after lifetime, it's been there, done that. They work the puzzle in the energy that has been created by humans since the beginning of human time. It's a beautiful system. It's elegant. Where can this go? And that is what we have said before, that is just astonishing. I see it even now. You've been there. There are so many on the planet who reel at the idea that you might have come from Pleiadian DNA. And they say that's just absurd, not understanding that they were Pleiadians. Some of you have been called space creatures or whatever. You are. You were. That's the plan. When the oven was ready, in came the salt and pepper to make you who you are. And it's beautiful beyond what you can imagine. Step by step, DNA can evolve. And what happens when it evolves is higher consciousness, not better biology. Your biology is set like it is. It's beautiful. But the other thing we've told you is with a higher functioning DNA, something happens to your biology. We have said this, that low energy viruses cannot attach themselves to a high energy consciousness. Your chemistry of your cells are all involved in that which is the development of consciousness in your DNA. So the higher your percentage of DNA is working, and the more complete it is, the more coherent it is, the higher it is, the less disease there will be on the planet. Then the one we've never talked to about, Gaia will sense it. And in the sensing of that, you're going to have better crops. You're going to have to see it to believe it. Have you ever known somebody who had a green thumb? They could grow anything. And then someone next to them can grow nothing. Now, can you explain that in a way that is not metaphysical? Here's the answer. That the one with the green thumb is one with the plants. There is a consciousness in the DNA that literally is speaking to Gaia differently than the one who cannot grow anything. That's what we're talking about. Can you imagine a higher consciousness Earth where you have triple the yield on crops? That's how you're going to feed populations that you're worried about feeding. Consciousness. Gaia will respond, and there's other things that will happen. Higher consciousness will change weather patterns. I'm not going to even go there. It's just too strange. Physics will respond to consciousness. The physics of the planet and the way weather works and the cycles all respond to you, and you've never known that. I've told you about the upcoming cold cycle. It's not designed to eliminate humans. It never was. It's designed to refresh the oceans so that food will be abundant for humans who decided to stay. That's what that's about. It's a cycle that's always been here, a cycle that may be a little premature because you decided to stay. A cycle that will help the fish and eventually regrow the reefs and all the things that you look at today and say they're diminishing and they're dying and we polluted them and all. Boy, you certainly haven't helped things, but you didn't start the cycle. That would have happened anyway. You're moving into a new area of space, even as I am sitting here, that's going to enhance the grid and allow for higher consciousness, less disease, greater growth in plants. There are so many good things for this human being who sits here and wonders if you're alone. Not understanding that the elegance of the DNA is all part of a higher consciousness plan where someday you'll be able to see it and marvel at what you didn't know. The reason for Earth is you. When Gaia starts to alter itself because of you, you'll start to change your mind maybe on God inside. Every single planet who has gone into a high consciousness has come to this conclusion. And in some of them, it was extremely tough because there was no connection between the building and college that was the one called divinity and the building called chemistry and the building called physics. And they all worked the puzzle differently and they all stayed in their own building until one day they had the big aha that there should be one building. Because they were all related. They were studying the parts without understanding the relationship. It happened on every planet before yours. The oneness of everything, because the relationship between the parts creates the whole. And you can't take the parts away from one another and then study them alone, because the puzzle will never come together. DNA helps with consciousness and the triad between the heart and the pineal and the brain. The brain is the logic, it's the rememberer, it's the storage. But DNA is the Akash. DNA represents so much more than synapse in your brain. It is more complicated than has been seen, and that makes it beautiful. But in the complexness of it, there's a simplicity of the plan. The puzzle comes together to make the whole simpler. And what I mean by that is when you assign the entire reality to one organ, it makes it super complex. When you share it with more than 4 things, it becomes simpler. Then you start to see what the things do. I'm way ahead of myself. This has been the discovery of planet after planet who goes into what you are going into now. Awakening. An awakening of self, awakening of consciousness, and the beginning idea of humanity. That there really can be a world where you look at each other and you say, we're the same. We're not going to war. We're the same. And we think differently and we worship differently the one God, but we're still the same. And we have the ability to do that without fighting about it. And a higher consciousness starts to agree. And a coherence of thought and compassion starts to create economies based on principles you haven't seen yet. Best thing you've got going is democracy. That was good, and now it isn't. You've seen it, and now it isn't. It's now dysfunctional. Democracy was never meant to have elections where winner takes all until the next election. It was meant instead for consensus of coherence and a system where everyone benefits instead of everyone fighting. There are new democracy principles coming. We've even told you about that. That will happen with a DNA that starts to be enhanced because it creates new thought. Things that have never been thought of are in that field now, waiting to be manifest. There's new healing modalities. There's new thoughts about how things can work. There's new energy. It's coming fast. There's new ways to have yourself so you don't have to worry about water with the weather change. It's going to come so that the weather change does not then spoil what has been here for centuries. It's coming, especially on the coasts where you have plenty of water to desalinate. It's coming. This is what this shift is all about, and it's beautiful. I'm looking at a planet right now in graduation, and it's not here. Way before your time. It had a 1 million year start. Not quite, but almost a million year start on you. And it went into graduation, and DNA started to become that which was higher and higher until it got to that place of 70 or 80% of the ability of any human who has DNA, 70 to 80%. And when it was 70 to 80%, they looked at the earth and they said, the earth is not ready. It's not really ready yet. It needs some things. It has to go through some other dispensations. It has to start to boot itself up and raise itself up and have better choices. Let's give them something. And so they sent masters. Masters who could change physics, who could create food where there was no food and heal when there was no healing. And they became miracle workers, and you saw them, and they were humans. And almost every one of them you did away with. You weren't ready. They were right, but they brought love. That's where that came from. And then there were the angels. Who are angels, do you really think? Well, they've come from heaven, you think. Where is heaven, do you think? Could it even possibly be that angels are those from other planets who have been ascended for a very long time? They walk into your world. They walk through walls because they can. They have shifting colors because they can, and the only thing you can do to make sense of it with your mind is put skin and wings on them and give them a name. And now they're humans. Did you ever think of that? Filled with God, filled with love, filled with purpose, visiting you for only benevolent reasons. Only benevolent reasons to give you information, to help you out. And when humanity needs a push in the right direction, the angel shows up and says, fear not. I know I don't look right. I know it looks fearful because I'm just a swirling ball of energy with a voice. And every single time it's happened from the burning bush forward, it's been benevolent. And it's been in guidance for your civilization to bring you to a point now where you can examine these things, some of which will sound blasphemous. Who are you to decide how God does things? Because God does things better than you think, and more benevolent than you think. And it brings it right down to you in the chair listening to this. Better than you think, more benevolent than you think, all ready to go. That's the human being. You're starting to see change. And in this, you're starting to examine and discover you are bigger than you thought. Let this day ring with that truth. As you leave these chairs and slowly over time examine that, could it be true that I'm not alone, that there is a plan, that humanity is starting that, and that I'm involved because I'm an old soul, perhaps an original? And that would be true. All of what I have just said is accurate, and someday it will be seen. And when it is, the big aha. In the beginning, there was love, and it never went away. Sometimes it may suspend your reality to believe that Lemuria was real. That actually that many years ago you participated in something that looked so different. We've mentioned so many times the odds of you being a woman now, if it were random, and it's not. The beauty of the love that has gone into this plan has you as a woman now, sitting in chairs, just between you and I, asking yourself, is it possible that I might have had past lives in an original teaching time? A time in Lemuria that lasted thousands of years. So many of you weren't in the same group, didn't know each other, but you had the same star mother teachers. And in that, there is a camaraderie of being in the launching pad of the Akash, of actually participating in something so beautiful and so unique. And if you were there, and only you know this, but that's what attracted you to sit in the seats, if you were there, you've all participated in something absolutely stellar. You've had those from the stars come and sit in front of you and love you. And as children, you participated in the teaching that was given by them. As adults, you continued. And then when you reached a certain age, women, everything changed and the teaching changed. And the Star Mother looked you in the eye and said, it's time for you to learn about a higher consciousness, because you're going to carry that burden, that mantle of the shaman. And when she said that to you, it was a time of retrospect. But what she really meant is, from now on, part of the teaching of the Lemurian teaching wheel was the coming Akash. That is, she told you that you would live again. You see, Lemuria was the first time. She told you that you would come many times and that there would be a build-up of memories, and they would be stored within you somehow. That you wouldn't necessarily remember them like reading a book, but they would be there subconsciously for you to remember. And she told you that the time that you were in right now, these teachings that you were going to have right now would stick there and stay there, and someday you'd remember them. And if you had accomplished what many thought you would not and gone past the shift, it would be time to awaken them. And here you sit in the chair, asking the question, was I there? Most of you were old souls, everyone, very old souls, everyone. women all. And in a moment, you're about to do something. I told you this before. It's just us talking right now. All those others will hear it later, but just us. You're going to meet the men, and you're going to do something. You're going to do a little honoring ceremony. There's a spoke on the Lemurian teaching wheel called the mirror. That's all it's called. And as children, you learn some basics, and as adults, you learn something greater. But as shamans in training, the mirror was the most profound. It's a spoke that goes from the middle to the outside and the outside to the middle. It's a two-way street. And the mirror is what happens when you look at yourself and you see God. And when you look at God and see yourself. The mirror is when you look in the eyes of another person and you see God. You see yourself. It's a training that says to the shaman, you cannot see the outside of anything. You can only go inside, and there you're going to see a commonality of beauty, of compassion. In essence, perhaps you don't expect. And the training is this, shaman. Everyone you meet, everywhere you go, you are in them, they are in you. God is in you, God is in them. A commonality that is so extraordinarily beautiful. And everything else, that's just the shell. In a moment, the men will come into the room. I want to tell you something, and something you know very, very well. The difference between genders in this culture. Men don't find themselves in circles like this doing ceremony. It's not what they want to do. It's not what they're comfortable with. Even the most spiritual of them don't want to surround in a circle, sing songs, and celebrate. That's not what they do. Men will often have groups that will meet together and study, and they'll discuss, and it'll be cerebral. But they won't gather in a circle and sing songs. And so for the few moments they're in here, for some of them, it's a stretch. And they're coming anyway. Some of them have no idea why they're coming. They're just doing it because you are here. And they haven't got anything better to do. But when this is over, they may have tears in their eyes because of what you're going to do. If you're going to practice the mirror, I want you to get ready for it. I want you to see God in you. And make the honoring that's about to be something that they won't forget. Not just the ceremony, but a time for a few minutes where time was suspended, and a group of beautiful, hearted Lemurian women looked at them and only saw the God in both of you. Where gender disappeared and the honoring was for their lives, your lives, for the journey together, for working the puzzle with both genders. Don't make them uncomfortable, but honor them with the mirror.
All you want is my hunger. All you need is my pain. Nothing in between ever met you lost.
And so it is.
When you were born there was thunder, fire lit in the sky as to lead astray. Now heavy rain pours out of you and me. Come back, rain. Come and ease this obsession. Full force dispossess. Come and quiet this aggression. on